Welcome to Once Upon a Real Life with Belle, and this is a podcast about real life, just as it is. Each episode is an honest conversation about the moments that challenge us and sometimes surprise us. No filters, no pretending. Quick thanks to the show sponsor, ActiveFlex. If you're looking for pain-relieving gel with long-lasting relief for painful muscles and joints, you can use my discount code, BELLE10 for 10% off. Just visit alphasport.com.au. Let's begin today's episode. On the morning of February 1942, war came to Australia's doorstep. Just 10 weeks after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the city of Darwin was bombed by the Japanese aircraft in what would become the largest single attack ever mounted on Australian soil. More than 240 enemy planes targeted the harbour, airfields and military installations in a devastating assault that left hundreds dead, ships sunk, and the town in chaos. Yet, for decades, the full story of the bombing was downplayed or kept from the public. Today, we dive into the facts, the damage, the response, and the legacy with my guest, military historian, former RAAF officer, and author Anthony Cooper. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you, Belle.
Anthony, as an author, you have written incredibly detailed books with a focus on Australian military aviation during World War II, including RAAF bombers over Germany, Kokoda airstrikes, HMAS Bataan, Sub Hunters, the new one, Dispatches from Berlin, and Darwin Spitfires, the real battle for Australia. Now, all of these books independently pique my interest, and I would think each deserve their own episode. If you're open to that, let's talk. But today we're going to talk about the mostly unheard of Battle of Australia, and it's that of the Darwin Spitfires. So, Anthony, for those unfamiliar, what was Darwin's role in World War II?
Darwin was and is a military base, always has been. So it's an artificial town, and it's always been propped up from the south. It is, as you say, the doorstep to Australia, and it has always had military significance, and it's always had an integral part in the defence of Australia, particularly for air and naval. So if we just cut to 1942, it's a naval base. It's a refuelling base, very important refuelling base. So if you're going to have any hope as a naval task group of operating in the waters towards Indonesia, for example, which we did, by the way, in early 1942, you would be refueling at Darwin on the way out, on the way back in. For the air, it's absolutely critical to be able to operate aircraft from Darwin if you're going to have any hope whatsoever of striking back at the enemy. In our case, we had enemy installations in western, if we just think of Darwin's front, from east to west, Western New Guinea, Timor, and all of the islands of Indonesia. So there's quite a broad front facing Darwin. And obviously, if you're running an air force, and we were running an air force, you always want to bomb the other guy. And the only way you could get to the targets that you wanted to bomb is if you based your bombers in Darwin. So it's absolutely essential as a military base for the Navy and for the Air Force.
And what year was the installation built? So are we talking after World War I or
Pre-World War II. Yeah, but it's been a naval base for a very long time. So the refueling facilities for the Navy have always been there, certainly throughout the 20th century. As an air base, if we recall the pioneering flights from the Ross brothers in 1919, the first flight from England to Australia in the Vickers Vimy, they landed at Darwin. If you think of all of those pioneering flights, Amy Johnson, Bert Hinkler, Kingsford Smith in all of his attempts, the famous air race in 1934 from London to Melbourne with the de Havilland Comets landing, everyone's landing at Darwin. So it's an absolutely essential part of pioneering aviation. Amelia Earhart, it's aircraft performance being what it was in the 30s and 40s. If you're going anywhere at all, you've got to land at Darwin. So the Air Force wasn't stupid. It had its limitations, of course, but the Air Force was well aware of Darwin's significance as a refueling base for aircraft as well. And so they upgraded the facilities in the years leading up to the outbreak of the Pacific War.
So 38, 39.
Yep. So RAAF Darwin, RAAF-based Darwin, which is the current airport, international airport at Darwin, it was the buildings were quite new when the Japanese bombed it. So the Air Force was just putting the finishing touches on this base, this new base, and then it got bombed. It was still used, but obviously they had a lot of wrecked buildings.
Yeah.
And to this day, it's a RAAF base.
That's what made Darwin such a key military hub, obviously. Now, tell me about February 19, 1942. What happened on that day?
Well, the Japanese were in the process of invading the Netherlands East Indies, which is current-day Indonesia. And the place that they were particularly invading, they were in the process of launching an amphibious assault upon Timor. Now, when you think about that for a moment, it's like a D-Day situation. I think most people would have some understanding of D-Day, that invasion of Normandy in 1944. It's like that, but on a small scale. So you've got a lot of infantry soldiers on ships. You need to get them over the side of the ships into the landing craft. You need to get them ashore. So you're going to have thousands of infantry soldiers stuck in ships for 24 hours, 36 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours while the landing is being done. The last thing you want is for those ships to be attacked by enemy warships or bombed by enemy aircraft. These are the Japanese. This is the Japanese invasion.
This is the Japanese invasion. Got it. Because our boys were gone.
Yeah, I'm just putting myself in the situation of the Japanese.
Yeah.
So if you were them,
the
last thing you'd want would be for your infantry to be killed in their hundreds aboard the troop ships.
Mm-hmm.
So like any sensible military operators, they realised that it was very important to suppress the Darwin base, to give them the security to put the troops ashore,
of course,
without getting bombed.
Yes.
And so they clobbered Darwin port to suppress our Navy, and they clobbered our RAAF Darwin to suppress our Air Force. By our, I mean us and the Americans,
right?
As a joint.
So at that point, we had the American soldiers at the base in Darwin.
Yes,
we had what was left of our boys. Did we have a lot of airmen up there at the time?
Not many, but I mean, the Air Force, our Air Force, was a small organisation at that time. But yes, Darwin was being used by our Air Force. We had bombers there. Not many. As I say, we're a small Air Force. The Americans were using RAAF Darwin as a essential base to move aircraft to Java to try to be involved in the defence of Java, which was happening simultaneously. So there was constant American military traffic through RAAF Darwin, and there was also constant American naval activity as they're coming in to be refueled. So both the Australian as well as the American navies are operating, and the Australian and the American Air Forces are operating. It's all happening. It's a very, very busy place.
Yeah.
There's a military emergency happening up in the Netherlands East Indies. The Allies are scrambling, trying to hold against the Japanese attack. And the Japanese assault on Timor was a specific military operation which gave rise to the 19th February raid. And they just happened to have, or they didn't just have, they had planned to have their carrier group involved in the descent upon the Netherlands East Indies. So that's 4 carriers, same carriers that were involved in the attack upon Pearl Harbor. Mm-hmm. Same airmen, same operational staff.
And this was completely unexpected for Australia, or was there whispers?
The Australian and the Allied intelligence was well aware of the fact that there was a threat.
Yeah.
They didn't expect, obviously, an attack of that magnitude. But
did we lose all of our bombers? Did we lose our ships?
No. The attack proved to be mainly an attack upon the shipping in the harbour. Mm-hmm. They did bomb the RAAF Darwin airbase as well, but it was primarily attack upon ships. And the Americans had probably 24 ships anchored in the harbour. And unfortunately, Darwin was a very inefficient port. It only had a single, very poorly designed pier. And so movement between ship and shore was very slow. And so all of these ships were at anchor. and the Japanese arrived and they bombed the ships. So the big attack on Darwin is 80% of it is Japanese aircraft bombing the ships, and most of the ships are American.
Yep.
So 235 people are killed. By far, the great majority of them are Americans in the ships. And by sinking those ships and damaging those ships, the Japanese are assuring themselves that there's no threat coming from Darwin that can come across the sea and attack their transport fleets.
What military targets apart from ships were hit? So you were saying it was also the military air base?
Yeah, and the fuel tanks.
Brand new one?
So if you go to Darwin now, down near the port, you can still see the fuel farm. There's a cluster of rather large fuel tanks, similar to what you get out at Eagle Farm here. And those had been there for a very long time, installed by the Navy, our Navy, and obviously they make very good targets. They're above ground. And so there's some really spectacular pictures of them burning. And in fact, it proved to be a popular target throughout the succeeding 2-year campaign of bombing raids against Darwin. The Japanese hit them on other occasions too, and we get similar spectacular scenes of burning fuel tanks.
Wow.
Even as late as 1943.
When we were first hit in Darwin on that day, what was the government's reaction? Was it handled and given to the public, or was it kept quiet and censored at the time?
It was in the newspaper, so you can look it up on Trove. We can, as soon as we finish this, we can both go on Trove and we'll be able to read all the reportage. So there was extensive reportage straight after and for days afterwards. There's no secret. What was secret was the casualties, but like as a school teacher, we used to have excerpts, even in the textbooks, from what the newspapers were saying, and there was no hiding the fact that it was a very severe raid, even if the government had massaged the death toll figures downwards for public consumption.
Yeah.
So an intelligent reader would have gone, that's a really severe raid. They've really hit Darwin hard, and they've used a great deal of force to do so.
It's a lot of airplanes coming across.
It's a lot of airplanes. It's a big raid, and you wouldn't call it panic, but there was certainly alarmist front pages in newspapers. People would certainly have been concerned. You would have needed to have been in a bubble somehow not to have been aware of the raid.
Yeah, and then air bunkers were built across the country as well.
Yeah,
air raid bunkers.
Air raid bunkers in people's backyards and in schools and public buildings and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
That's just a standard precaution that was conducted everywhere where communities were even remotely vulnerable to bombing. Yeah. So it's just standard response. And
was that the only attack on Darwin? Touch upon the next 2 years for me.
No, that's only the first raid. So for the next 2 years, there was a big air raid with the bombers coming from Ambon, typically, and the escorting fighters coming from Timor, always. That's always where the fighters came from. And one big raid at least every month during the operating season, because you can't really fly bomber formations until the weather clears up. So you've got to wait for the monsoon to finish. And that's typically February, March. So the raids will start as soon as the weather clears, February, March each year. And then the raids have to stop when the monsoon comes, which is sort of September-ish.
That also means we can't fly also?
Yeah, it means we're also limited, but it's just a little interesting technicality. They flew high, we flew low. So when we struck back at them, we could fly underneath the weather because our tactic was to fly really low.
What did we have in the way of aircraft?
Initially, we had Lockheed Hudson bombers, which is not a terribly impressive machine. But by the end even before the end of 1942, we had Bristol Beaufighters.
Tell me about these, because in my head, I'm going Memphis Belle B-52s, or I'm going F-111. So tell me about these planes.
Yeah, well, a Lockheed Hudson is just a glorified airliner of the time. So it's a twin-engine aircraft. They've got one flying at Temora down in New South Wales, the only flying one in the world. It's just a bog-standard World War II light to medium bomber.
And how many airmen?
It's got a crew of 4.
Right.
And it's got enough range to fly from Darwin to Timor, bomb something and come home.
So 1 or 2 bombs?
It would have typically 4 250-pounders.
Yep.
4 or 6 250-pounders.
And how many of those did we have?
We had 2 squadrons of them up at the Darwin Air Bases throughout 1942, but total number of aircraft, it would be frequently down to as low as 12, but sometimes it would be up to 20 or so.
And where did they come from? Did they come from Europe? Did they come from Britain?
No, we had re-equipped our Air Force with Hudsons from 1940 onwards. So the Australian government had wisely bought quite a good American aircraft compared with some of the other choices. So it was a good aircraft.
Surprising that the Japanese didn't bomb those on their way across.
Well, we got them. They came to Australia across the Pacific, and on ships, and so they couldn't do anything about that. But our Air Force was based down south, basically. So Richmond, just outside Sydney, and Laverton outside Melbourne were the 2 big bases. But as time went on, so by 1941, as early as 1941, Brisbane was becoming actually the aviation base for our Air Force, particularly for the Americans. So Archerfield ends up becoming really quite a big base. Amberley was only being built, so it's a place full of temporary buildings, dirt runways. It's not much of a place in this period, but it's nonetheless used initially by us as a training base, and then we give it to the Americans, and then they use it as a major logistical and technical centre for all of their Air Force units which are arriving in Queensland, but also Eagle Farm. The Americans used that. It was just an embryonic civil airport was what it was when they found it, but they quickly turned it into quite a large aeronautical centre.
And that was 1941.
This is not 1942. The Americans are doing it in 1942, but the Australian Air Force is already configuring these bases for use in 1941. So if you think about Brisbane right now, it really is an aviation centre. Next time you take a flight, just look across over to the east of the airfield, and you can see all of the big maintenance hangars for Qantas and other organisations. And much the same is true of Amberley. So the Air Force has recently acquired the Wedgetail AWACS aircraft, and that whole project was run out of Amberley. They developed the aircraft there. Boeing has now a major hangar there where they do all kinds of technical stuff to do with the Wedgetails. So World War II, particularly 1942, is the time when Brisbane flips to being the aviation hub of military aviation in Australia. But remember, Qantas was a Queensland company, and Qantas's major operational base was also Brisbane, Archerfield, pre-war, before they got the flying boats, obviously, when they had to move to the water, and then they had to move down to Rose Bay in Sydney, because they're operating a machine which has to operate off water. So Qantas could no longer use Archerfield. But before the introduction of the flying boats in 1937, I'm going to say.
Is this an aircraft carrier? What's a flying boat?
A flying boat is an airliner which lands on the water.
Get out.
Yeah. So Archerfield is already a super important place. So when the Americans arrive in 1942, they find an aviation hub which they're able to use. So there's civil engineering, there's aviation engineering workshops. There's firms that can build things and repair things. There's a supply chain to get spare parts. There's tools. So Brisbane has been terribly, terribly useful. So if we think of the south of Australia, so that's Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane, all of them have got major aviation technical infrastructure. And then if you think of the war is happening up north, so it's being run from Darwin, it's being supported from these major bases. So when they need new aircraft, they fly them up to Darwin from these southern bases. And it's not just Darwin where the action's happening. Obviously there's the war going on in New Guinea, and within that context, Townsville is virtually a frontline airbase. And again, you've got the pre-war development by the RAAF of RAAF Townsville as a one of the major new bases like RAAF Darwin, and that's already a going concern. And then the Americans arrive in February, March, and they've got all of these bomber units and fighter units. They're just one after the other arriving across the Pacific in the first half of 1942, and they typically arrive at Archerfield. They get themselves sorted out and reorganised, and then within weeks or even days in some cases, they fly north to bases in and around Townsville.
Mm-hmm.
So Townsville also becomes this major centre. So, the Brisbane line myth is so misleading. So great.
So is it a myth? So the Brisbane line was, from what I understand, if Australia was and the Allies were to lose Darwin, Broome, Townsville, then all of the defence will come from Brisbane and down. So they would just give it away, the top half of Australia, and then defend from Brisbane down.
Yeah.
You think it's a myth?
Well, I don't just think. I know it's a myth, because all you need to do is just get pins on a map and put pins about where all the units were actually sent in the first half of 1942, and they're all sent north. As soon as there was a base that could take them, because it's all of this. I'm talking about infrastructure building, base building.
Yeah.
That's all civil engineering. So you need civil engineering contractors to get their bulldozers and their all the rest of the equipment.
Yeah, to build it.
And they've got to make these runways. They're going to make all the taxiways and make the access roads. There's plumbing, there's water supply. And this is happening too.
They weren't giving it away.
This is no.
They were not giving it away.
Well, someone's got to build it.
Yeah.
You know, the military services didn't have the capability of doing that much civil engineering, and so you've got civil contractors doing this kind of work, and also all of the main roads departments. So Darwin is a good example. We have got this, I'm going to call it an orgy of airfield building, which is going on from before Pearl Harbor and throughout pretty well all of 1942. Airfield after airfield after airfield being built up there. And the airfields are being built by civil contractors, by, yes, some military engineering units from both the Australian services as well as from the American services, but also teams from main roads departments from the States. So there'll be, it could be the South Australian Main Roads Department does this bit, and the Queensland Main Roads Department does this other bit.
So we came together.
Well, that's why you have governments, I guess.
Yeah.
Governments can organise stuff.
Yeah.
That's precisely why you have governments.
Yeah.
They're capable of organising big things.
Well, it's for the greater good at this time. Yeah.
And so ultimately we're successful on all fronts.
Now go back to the planes. So the defence, and what did we do after that bombing?
Well,
what did we do?
As I said, we've had this orgy of base construction, and as soon as bases are ready for human habitation, as well as habitation by aircraft, they fly in a unit to occupy the base. And so from the beginning of 1942 through to the end of 42, there's just, over time, the number of flying units in Darwin increases. And they come to include a range of bombers. So even the Americans send bomber units to the Darwin front so that they can add their effort to the Australian efforts.
Was it a battle in the air, or was it all about bombing targets?
It's bombing targets in the middle, in the Netherlands East Indies, current day Indonesia, and as far afield as Ambon. So they're quite long raids. The Americans have got big aircraft, bigger than we have. So they had B-24 Liberators and B-17 Flying Fortresses, which are large four-engined aircraft, which have a far longer reach than the Hudsons, which we had at that time. So the Americans could do the really long raids out of Darwin.
How many raids did we do?
Oh, look, constant. So 1942, 1943.
It was a big battle.
It's a campaign. Air warfare is a long slog. It's repetitive, and nothing changes overnight. You only get a result after months of effort, maybe even more than a year of effort. Yeah. And so you have to have patience. You have to have persistence. You have to have the ability to withstand losses. So you'll send crews out and they just won't come back. And you know that.
Those crews, of course. Go ahead.
And with the Japanese, probably the crews will be murdered if they survive the crash of their aircraft. So there's that additional thing. But our generals, our air generals, are tough, like generals tend to be from all countries. And so they know that you can't make an omelette without cracking eggs. And so if you want to run an air campaign, you have to lose crews, and they know that, and they lose their crews. So it's an expensive, bloody business. It's not particularly inefficient, but from the beginning, so from even before the 19th of February raid to the very end, the Japanese know that they're not going to get away scot-free. They know that we've got bombers. They know we know where they are, and they know that they'll probably get bombed if they do anything that we notice. So, for example, if they land a group of bombers at one of the bases in Timor, if they had any brains, they'd know, would probably notice that, and will bomb that base. And so the Japanese have to behave on Timor with quite a lot of discretion.
Yeah.
So, in other words, if they're going to land there, they might land at the end of the day, say at about 5 o'clock, do their refueling, get the crews to get fed, put them to bed for the night, and then take off at dawn the next day.
Yeah.
Because they know if they leave those bombers sitting on the ground, chances are some Hudsons from Darwin are going to turn up and bomb them during the day. It's that level, right? So it's nothing's decisive. Like I said, air war is a slow, grinding business, and the effect is cumulative. Eventually, one side or the other will give up.
Yeah.
But it takes...
But we went right through to 1945.
Yeah.
That bombing campaign continued.
Well, and the Japanese bombing campaign stopped. That's the significant thing. So, yes, they were able to launch raids upon Darwin and the various airfields around south of Darwin.
So also Townsville, I believe, and Broome.
Yeah.
They were the other two that were bombed, right?
That's right.
They were targeted.
But both of them were trivial attacks, except for the death toll in the Broome attack. The raid that struck Broome unfortunately coincided with the presence of a lot of flying boats, which had just come from Java. Most of them were Dutch, and most of them were full of Dutch civilians, the wives and children of servicemen, as well as some Dutch servicemen, but Americans too. And so the harbour had a dozen flying boats on the water, and then the raid arrived. And scores of people got killed in those flying boats. So the death toll ended up being awful and ended up being a tragic event. But in all brutality, and you've got to be brutal if you're going to think militarily, it was a trivial raid despite that, because it was just a once-off flash in the pan. The raids on Townsville were even more trivial. There was 3 of them. They hit nothing. In complete waste of petrol. But they did demonstrate their ability to extend their reach by air that far.
Do you think there was a real concern about Brisbane being reached by the Japanese at that time?
Well, that's why we needed to hold New Guinea, particularly Port Moresby. All these things are interrelated. So if we think of the Battle of the Coral Sea, if we think of the fighting along the Kokoda Track, if we think of the Battle of Milne Bay, and all of that's happening from, Coral Sea's in May, and Milne Bay's in August, and the Kokoda campaign reaches its climax in September. So if we just think about that period from May through to September 42, the Japanese are trying to take Port Moresby via various means. Each of them is unsuccessful, but that's what they're trying to do. And obviously the Australian Defence Forces, as well as the Americans, are trying to stop them from taking Port Moresby, and they're successful in so doing.
They got close?
But just spare a thought for it, right? So let's say they did take Port Moresby. they could launch big bombing raids like the ones they launched against Darwin on Townsville, and they could launch nuisance bombing raids like the ones that they launched against Townsville in July, those 3 nuisance raids that I mentioned against Brisbane. So Brisbane would be bombed, but completely ineffectually and trivially if Port Moresby was taken. But Townsville would be bombed seriously.
Yeah.
But they didn't.
Did they get close?
No. The Japanese, they had one shot in them, that is to say, one decent shot, and that was initial onrush. They're a bit like the Germans. The Germans were very good at that initial onrush, the first blitzkrieg, but after that, they were pretty hopeless, frankly. They deserved to lose their war because of their incompetence at the strategic level. Japanese are the same. They had this good blitzkrieg in them, and sure, that was scary, and they were able to push us back a long way, take a bunch of territory off us, make us look really ordinary. Our entire 8th Division goes into the POW camps, and it's a disaster. But as soon as they'd completed their, what I'm going to call a blitzkrieg, for the sake of simplicity, they got nothing left.
Yeah.
And so by the middle of 1942, they're just hung out to dry, waiting for what we're going to do back to them. And we do it back to them. And so from the time the Americans land in Guadalcanal in August 1942, and of course Midway's happened in June, by the time the Americans sink those 4 carriers in June 1942, it's over for the Japanese. So it's like a bright, flaming star, but then it goes out. It's hard then you win the war. You've still got to kill, and again, all brutality. Japanese, being Japanese, you've got to kill every last one.
Yeah.
Every island that they're on, you've got to go onto that island and kill every last one to win the war, you know? So even though they've completely cooked their goose by mid-42, they're still there, and you've still got to win the whole thing.
So for the listeners, a blitzkrieg is an assault which is by air, by water, and by land at the same time. So it's like
it's
shock and awe.
Shock and awe.
Shock and awe. And then
it's rapid, yeah.
So are you telling me that pretty much Kokoda was done by 1943?
Oh, totally. It was the Japanese were heading rearwards along the Kokoda track in September.
Right. And then those POWs, how did we get them out, and did we get a bunch out?
No. They all
perished.
No, they didn't all perish. The death rate amongst the POWs from the 8th Division, which was captured in Singapore, is about, from memory, 1 in 4.
Were captured? Sorry,
no, were killed.
Were killed.
So
Okay.
so were killed by neglect.
Yeah. And they were building train lines?
Most of them weren't. Most of them were still stuck in the POW camps. But yeah, some of them were building train lines. So yeah, that was you can't get them back. You can actually win the war to get your POWs back.
But our Air Force maintained their stance in the Northern Territory and the top of Australia anyway throughout the war till the end of 45.
Yeah. I mean, an Air Force bombing is in an Air Force's DNA. If it has any aircraft which can carry bombs, and if there's any target within the flying range of the aircraft, they'll bomb. That's what an Air Force is about. People don't spend their careers becoming Air Force officers, you know, and airmen, you know, if they may not like it, obviously there's a lot of mixed emotions in the actual aircrew when they've got to board their aircraft.
Yeah.
But they know what they joined up for.
Yes.
There's no getting around it. So there's a serviceable aeroplane, there's bombs, you've got enough fuel to fly the target, that's what you're going to do. And so our Air Force does that from all the way through, from the start to the finish.
And so now go back to this Darwin Spitfire plane. Tell me about this aeroplane.
Well, it's the iconic British aircraft of the Second World War, and it's the darling of the press. So it's so photographed, and it features on all kinds of billboards to sell all kinds of products.
Yeah.
So it's a buzzword. It's a brand. It's a propaganda line. It's a myth. It's an icon. It's
It
a
is
symbol.
an icon. Yeah.
You name it, and that's what the Spitfire
Everybody
is.
knows it. And so were these pulled back from Britain at the time? Or did we
Yes.
have a bunch?
No. They didn't arrive until the end of 1942. And in the meantime, our Air Force had re-equipped with Kittyhawks, which is an American fighter, which is very broadly similar. It's broadly similar to the Spitfire. You'd have to say it is quite comparable to the Spitfire in many respects. So our Air Force in Australia had become a Kittyhawk Air Force. That is to say, the fighter squadrons flew Kittyhawks.
So both of these don't have bombs. They've got a machine gun.
They're fighters. They're meant to shoot down enemy aircraft, particularly shoot down enemy bombers.
Yeah.
That's their role. But politics being politics, Doc Evatt, who was the Attorney General as well as the Foreign Minister in the Curtin government, he did a trip to England in mid-42, and he bullied Churchill into giving Australia some warranty that England cares. And the context was that the Australian government was in the process of pulling out our army divisions out of the Middle East
to come home,
to come home and to fight in the South Pacific campaign, to kick the Japanese out of New Guinea.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of rancor on both sides, and Doc Evatt basically said, look, if you want to prove to the people of Australia that you're serious about all the stuff about the empire and the Commonwealth and how important the dominions are to you, blah, blah, then the Australian government demand a wing of Spitfires to come back and defend Australia.
Including airmen from
Including
Britain?
everything, the whole thing, yeah. Which was a bad decision because...
This podcast is supported by our friends at ActiveFlex, the Australian pain-relieving gel designed for long-lasting relief for painful muscles and joints. Always read the label and follow the directions for use. If your symptoms persist, please seek advice from a healthcare professional. You can shop online at alphasport.com.au and use my special code, BEL10, BEL10. And that's just a little special code for you as a listener of the podcast, using the discount code at alphasport.com.au.
Logistically, again, in all brutality, as a military officer, you'd say, we've already got Kittyhawks. We've got enough of them. We've got a training pipeline for Kittyhawks. We've got all the spare parts. Having Spitfires as well is only going to complicate things.
So you're saying it was more of just a token. We wanted support.
Political token.
Yes.
And it certainly would have made everything complicated for the Air Force because they've now got to run 2 lines of spare parts, 2 training pipelines. Yeah. It's inconvenient.
And so the Kittyhawks, they could handle the terrain and the weather and all those things that are very different than the weather that the Spitfires were
the Americans
in Europe.
Yeah, the Americans flew Kittyhawks from Darwin. So the air defence of Darwin was done in 1942 by an American fighter group, which is a 3-squadron organisation. So that's about 80 aircraft in total, about 100 pilots, and probably something of the order of 600 to 1,000 ground staff.
So why did the Japanese not bomb that platoon?
Oh, they did.
Is it called a platoon? What is it called?
So it's
battalion.
A fighters group is composed of 3 squadrons.
Mm-hmm.
So they decided, that's to say the Americans decided, that they wanted those 3 squadrons back on the New Guinea front. And meanwhile, the 3 squadrons of Spitfires were coming from England. And again, it's the same number. You've got 3 squadrons. You've got round about 80 aircraft. You've got round about 100 pilots. You've got, somewhere between 500 and 1,000 ground staff. So it's a free swap. It's a complete equal swap.
Mm.
And so the Spitfire wing arrived, and then they arrived down south. And again, they went on leave and got themselves reorganised. And then at the end of 1942, they repositioned to Darwin to take over those very same bases that the Americans had been operating in throughout 1942. So the Americans had reasonably successfully defended Darwin against the 1942 season of raids using Kittyhawks.
Yes.
So they'd proven that the aircraft was good enough to do that job.
Yeah.
And arguably, and I do argue, the Americans actually did it better than the Spitfire wing because they used better tactics. I sort of don't want to go into that now, but it's a complicated air warfare thing.
So was that MacArthur?
MacArthur was the Supreme Commander. He was right at the top, right on the top of Mount Olympus. So all these details are sort of have officers way below him.
Yeah.
Many, many command echelons below MacArthur.
Mm. So the Brits had a different idea of how to do this job.
So the Spitfire wing was composed of 2 Australian squadrons, both of whom had served in England. That is to say, flown operations against the Luftwaffe in 1941-42 across the English Channel into occupied France.
Mm-hmm.
As part of
the White Cliffs of Dover?
Yeah, pretty well.
Across.
In the opposite direction. So trying to do to the Germans what the Germans had done to Britain during the Battle of Britain.
Yeah.
So they'd become the attacker now. And so those 2 Australian squadrons plus a garden variety British squadron. So 3 squadrons, 2 of them were Australian, 1 of them was British. That's the Spitfire wing. They're the people who arrived in Australia at the end of 1942. And they're the people who get sent to Darwin at the end of 1942 to take over those American airfields. And they're the ones who conduct the air defence of Darwin in 1943. Yeah. And how well did they do? Well, by the end of the campaign, the Japanese gave up. So
So they pulled out. They went back, and where did they put their focus then?
New Guinea was an escalating catastrophe by then for the Japanese.
Yeah.
And so they needed New Guinea a lot more than they needed anything that they were doing in Timor. Like, they were never going to invade Darwin, whereas they were invading New Guinea.
Mm. So the feel was, for Australians at the time, was it that they were fearing that Japan would want to invade?
Yeah, there were several invasion scares throughout 1942.
Yeah.
So it was something like, obviously the intelligence services in Australia, which were joint. So there was Australian intelligence agencies, American intelligence agencies, and even some British intelligence agencies, all working in a combined way, trying to read the tea leaves of intelligence data to try to
what is their end goal?
You're trying to deduce where is the enemy? What's he got there?
Yeah.
What's the pattern in it? What's he about to do?
Yeah.
And so you're constantly trying to assess the enemy's capability and as well as his intentions.
Mm.
And so several times in 1942 they got it wrong, and there was an invasion scare where they really thought the Japanese were going to come across the Timor Sea and invade Darwin, which seems fanciful in retrospect, but 1942 wasn't a great year for the Allies, even though, as I say, we won signal victories against the Japanese at Midway, Milne Bay, and at Guadalcanal. So with very much the war flips to our side for sure, decisively in 42, but still it's a pretty bleak year.
Yeah.
Despite that fact.
So what year was Hiroshima?
45.
That was 45. So when they left for the next 3 years, where did they put their focus, the Japanese?
Oh, they just had to scramble to try to hold, I said they made this blitzkrieg push, this rapid rush where they took all of these places which we had formerly owned, us and the Americans, of course, and the Dutch and the British. So, it's the Japanese assault, which was undertaken from December 1941 through to about April. Like the last American troops surrender in the Philippines in April 1942.
Mm.
So that pretty well bookends their attacks.
Yeah.
And at the end of those attacks, they're holding this island chain dangling out in the middle of the Pacific.
Yes.
And they're holding bits of the Solomon Islands, including a bit of Guadalcanal. And they're holding a bit of the island of New Guinea. And, of course, all of the Dutch East Indies.
Yeah.
And so you think of it as a big arc, and you've got military outposts committed to defending all of those places. And so from really from the American operation against Guadalcanal in August 1942 onwards, the Japanese are just scrambling to try to hold on to what they've got.
So one would wonder, or I would wonder, what was the motivation for America to drop nuclear bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, but not over in Europe? And why 3 years after Pearl Harbor?
Well,
what were the Japanese doing to the Americans at the time?
There's some really good reasons. Firstly, why it's Japan, because they had actually got Germany to surrender in May, so several months before. But would the Americans have used the atomic bomb upon Hitler's Germany had that war progressed into 1946?
So you wonder if they would have.
Well, probably
Yeah.
would.
Yeah.
I guess they would, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's why it's Japan and not Germany. Why 3 years after? Because it takes that long to perfect the technology.
So this was building the bomb.
Yeah.
So they were always going to do it.
Getting a bomb that actually worked.
It's retribution.
It's all a last-minute thing. The bomb project has gone for certainly 3 years, and they explode their first bomb as a test bomb in Nevada or somewhere.
Yeah.
One of those
I saw a film
southwestern
about it.
states.
Mm.
Very shortly before they drop the next one on Hiroshima.
Yeah.
So the timeline is really short. Everything's just in time. And basically the technicians are gone, we've built the bomb, and then the general's going, great, we'll use it. It's all just in time.
Mm.
And so that's why it's 3 years after, because that's the earliest they could possibly make a weapon available. And why did they drop it? Well, I think just remember that, well, like my father was a sailor in the Australian Navy, and he was actually in the Navy at that time, and he didn't experience kamikaze attacks. But there's lots of Australian sailors, but particularly American sailors who did. So just remember, on a daily basis in the ships of our fleet, men are being killed by blazing petrol from aircraft which have, have you seen that splash of petrol, burning petrol, that comes from a crashing aircraft on a solid target like a ship?
Yeah.
So
a kamikaze is is it a Japanese word though?
It is.
Yeah. So the Japanese word that
east
means
wind. Yeah.
East wind.
A favourable wind. A wind where the gods are with you.
Oh, really?
Is the implication. Yeah.
And it's the aeroplane, the pilot making the choice to use his own aeroplane as the weapon. Yeah. So he'll it's essentially suicide.
But personally speaking, like, I really do object to having our sailors burnt to death, on a weekly basis on the decks of their ships through these kamikaze attacks.
Yeah.
And I'd be pretty keen to stop that. Also, you've got airmen still being shot down, and typically, like my book, Kokoda Airstrikes, there's lots of airmen in the course of that book. I only covered part of 1942, or most of 1942 really. But every single airman in that book who survives being shot down and lands in Japanese territory gets murdered. There's not one airman in my book who survives getting captured after being shot down.
There was no grace.
So I kind of object to that as well. And I know it's not my area, but the naval airmen that are operating over Japan in naval aircraft, every time a bomber goes down, there's 2 or 3 guys, if they survive, who are there ready, who are the latest victims, of
Japanese.
So why did they bring it to an end? I kind of understand why they did.
Yeah.
Just end it.
Yeah, just end it. And so Japanese planes that went down in Australia, I assume some did crash here and there were survivors. And did we POW or what did we do?
Like, it's chilling. We did take some Japanese airmen captive. There was a couple of Zero pilots that were taken captive. One on the 19th of February raid. He crash landed his aircraft on, I think it was Melville Island, just one of the Tiwi Islands off to the north of Darwin. And he gets captured by an Aboriginal guy, amusingly enough. and like it's a real sort of down home. It's not a very dramatic story. He just tamely let himself get captured.
Yeah.
And there's another Zero pilot who gets captured. He bails out in New Guinea, and he gets captured. There's a crew of a flying boat that come down in the waters north of Darwin, and they allow themselves to get captured.
Mm.
There's probably another example which I'm forgetting, but I'm just going to say they're the only 3 examples where the crews of Japanese aircraft allow themselves to be captured.
Mm.
The Japanese fighter pilots, they don't take parachutes, so they're flying a single-engine aircraft.
That's going to force them to kamikaze, isn't it?
They don't kamikaze, but they're not going to take a parachute because they say
Honor?
that the weight of the parachute would be better spent with petrol, because that would give you an extra 10 minutes or whatever in the air so that you can kill the emperor's enemies.
Flying time.
And so basically the code of honor in the fighter units was, if you go down, you just make sure you die with your aircraft. Just die in your aircraft. As far as bombers are concerned, like Japanese bombers have got a crew of, depending on the type, 8 men, 8, 9 men. And obviously there's command structure within the crew. You've got a commander who's in the commander of all the other lower rankers within the crew. The code of honor in bomber units is to just stay in your seats. And you've probably seen some movies where the aircrew are trying to get out.
Yeah.
And there's obviously a dramatic scene.
Yes.
I'm thinking of the Battle of Britain,
Yeah.
where there's quite a dramatic scene where a Heinkel is going down, burning. And they've done quite a good job filming the frantic efforts of the guys in the back to jettison the escape hatch and jump out and use their parachutes. And that's like a stock feature of, I think, of World War II air films. But in the case of the Japanese, you've got a commander there, and it's, sit tight, boys.
Yeah.
Let's ride it in.
Yeah.
And the aircraft just spins down into the sea or whatever. So, no POWs from the Darwin campaign.
Wow.
Yes.
No self-preservation whatsoever.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's chilling, isn't it?
Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Whereas our guys would every time try to jump out.
Yeah.
Because there's a chance they might survive.
That's right.
They know they might be beheaded.
Yeah.
But they'll still jump out. They'll still swim for shore. They'll keep trying.
Mm.
Yeah. But this is the enemy.
This is my opinion and the opinion of some of the people I've been surveying recently. In Darwin Spitfires, you mentioned that the threat of Australia was more serious than many realise. But why do you think this period of our national story has been overlooked? And why do you think that Kokoda seems to be a bigger narrative within the Australian psyche of our history, our war history, Europe and Kokoda?
Well, the second one, why Kokoda, I think the army within Australian culture has hijacked the kind of mythological aspects of Australian military history. So Australians, if I can generalise and just sweep my hand aerially across the whole scene, they think of khaki, they think of camo, they think of slouch hats, they think of a guy with a rifle and hand grenade.
And a cigarette.
Maybe a cigarette. Some first person shooter hero who goes and single-handedly takes down all these machine gun nests, etc. I think that's the way the story is told, and people have loved it. People have just swallowed it. They've just lapped it up. It fits somehow. Whereas my story, again, as an ex-Air Force guy and as a current pilot, like, obviously I think that there's a lot more to it than that. My father was a sailor, so in the Australian Navy. So I think that I don't like to use the word warrior because within American culture these days, that's been kind of, I think it's gone into an unpleasant direction where there's like a veneration, an uncritical veneration of serving people, which I find very un-Australian.
Mm.
So I'm really happy with soldier, sailor and airman as designations. because it implies that they're just a normal person and they've joined the service,
They're
and for
doing
the
their
duration
duty.
of the war, they're operating in that role. And so as far as the sailors are concerned, they're operators of large machinery like ships and the systems of ships. As far as airmen are concerned, they're military personnel who operate aircraft in most cases, as well as ground vehicles and a range of other things. I find that there's something very heroic about that. I mean, the heroism in my book is very downplayed, as it was for men at the time. Like the Air Force of the time was a very matter-of-fact organisation. They were very droll, and they didn't play up the blood and the guts or the losses. You know, there was something that was.
Well, that'll be why. I think that's the sentence there. It was Kokoda played up.
Well, I don't know. I don't think it was at the time. It's something that happened after Paul Keating made that speech in 1990, whatever it was. The whole Kokoda mythology has really arisen after that.
Right.
So I read my first book about Kokoda in the 1980s, written by a guy called, I think it was Raymond Paul. And it was about the only book other than the volume of the official history that was about Kokoda. But from Keating Speaks onwards, like you could fill row after row of a bookcase with Kokoda.
And everybody, you mentioned the word Kokoda, everybody knows it.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it. But I just think this campaign that you've written about in Darwin Spitfires.
I just don't think Aussies, your average Aussie, identify with the machine operator.
Yeah.
A Spitfire pilot is a machine operator. He's got to operate his engine controls. He's obviously got to operate his armament system as well, but he's a glorified machine operator.
It's a scary role to take.
It's a very dangerous role.
Yeah.
I think I say somewhere, if you actually run into an enemy air raid, 1 in 10 of you will be shot down. And if a Spitfire goes down, you've only got a 50% chance of getting out of it.
So what about the decommissioned Spitfires and the decommissioned Kittyhawks? Where are they? Did they get buried or?
They got scrapped. So the great thing,
ripped apart, literally.
Yeah, the great thing about aluminium is that you can just melt it down like Coke cans nowadays.
Yeah.
It's perfectly environmentally good to use a Coke can because you just chuck it in recycling and they melt like that, go back to liquid with hardly any energy use.
Yeah.
And all these airframes are World War II aircraft. You just cut them up with an oxy torch and then you just get bits of it, chuck it in the furnace, it melts back down to liquid aluminium.
Yeah.
And away you go. Make tinnies out of it.
Like we could have drunk a tinny.
Yeah.
That was made out of a Spitfire or a Kittyhawk. I was under the impression that the F-111s were buried. Is that?
Yeah, there would have been. The wings apparently were pulled off and
recycled
as aluminium. But the bodies where they had the fuel tank with the body of an F-111 is just full of fuel tanks.
Yeah.
And so it could be a valid thing to do to bury them for that reason. I may have heard also that.
How many did we have?
We initially had 24, and then we kept on buying attrition replacement airframes. So in the end, it was probably something of the order of 42.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I heard you can either debunk this myth or confirm, but I heard out near Acacia Ridge, near the Archerfield airway, there's a quarry.
Yeah.
What's in it? Is it tanks? I heard things are buried in that quarry.
Well, look, let's just say that if there was anything, that hobbyists have had a long time to find it.
And they've dug.
You know,
it's pretty deep.
It's a little bit like in Darwin Spitfires. Unfortunately, I can't, find evidence for all of those Japanese aircraft which will claim to have been shot down at the time. And so therefore I've had, in all due diligence, I've had to accept a far lower number of Japanese aircraft that were actually shot down. And there have been people, hobbyists do so much to find facts.
Yeah.
And hobbyists have been looking for the wrecks of aircraft.
Yeah.
Not only, there's still some Spitfires missing, shot down with the human remains of the pilot. There's at least one aircraft that's still never been found.
Over
So
land.
yeah, on the land,
Yeah.
not to mention the ones that went into the water, of course. But hobbyists have been scouring the ridges around in the operational area, trying to find aircraft wrecks from the war, both shot down Spitfires and other allied types, as well as the claimed Japanese bombers. And by the time I wrote that, I published it in 2011. I reckon that was enough time. If there was going to be any eureka moment when we go, here are these wrecks that everyone's been saying were here, it was enough time to allow the hobbyists to find them.
To find it.
They never did.
They never did.
People published books about this.
So you think there's nothing in the quarry?
The hobbyists would have had enough time to have found it. It's not there. It's like...
Because it's something that people think.
It's
wonder.
like the myths of the buried Spitfires at Oakey.
Yeah.
Hobbyists have had enough time
to find it.
To do the geomagnetic scanning or whatever to find stuff underneath the ground.
Yeah.
So no, it's a myth.
It's a myth. Well, you heard it here first. Okay, so the physical remnants that are still up in Darwin now, I know we've got the military museum. I know we've got, what's the big concrete bunker is it Nightcliff that's there that they would have shot out to sea from? Is it Nightcliff?
Oh, you're thinking of the artillery batteries?
Yes.
Yeah.
We used to go there as teenagers.
Yeah. So that's the old naval. It's the army actually. They were army guns, but it's a scheme of naval defence which was very much in the first half of the 20th century. Right. It's also true of Moreton Bay and the approaches to Brisbane. There's similar bunkers.
Oh, we've got them here too.
On the Bribey as well as Moreton.
Okay.
Other places. So you could visit them tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so one of the schemes of harbour defence of the time was to have really big guns, like 7-inch guns, 6-inch guns, 8-inch guns, 9-inch guns, that sort of thing, and all of the fire control apparatus. And so if any enemy warships attempt to break into your port, you basically shoot them and sink them before they can make it in. So those bunkers there, Darwin, they're still there. Guns.
They exist.
There's very little because the Air Force doesn't leave much trace of itself, certainly the wartime Air Force, because they're living on just bulldozed roads, tracks in the bush. They're living in tents. Things are perishable. So
why is that?
Well, they're not building in concrete. There's virtually no reinforced concrete. There would be some floors, like they might have an operations block.
Yeah.
Where they've got all the telephones and radios and everything like that, and they might have a concrete floor for there.
Yeah. And
if you go to these places now, you'll be able to find such locations. Yeah. Or the footing for a water tank
is still there.
There will still be some concrete, but most of it, you just remove it. You reuse it for something else.
Installations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what is available, there are some at Strauss, that's about probably half an hour at most south of Darwin along the highway.
Yeah, the Stewart.
There's quite a good little memorial on the old runway, because the old runway, the way they built those fighter strips during the war was they simply widened the road about 200 metres and just enough length for a fighter aircraft like a Kittyhawk or a Spitfire to take off on. And at Strauss, it's still there. So next time you're up there, you just look out for, they've got these two-dimensional silhouettes of Spitfires and Kittyhawks.
Wow.
Just pull over, read the blurb, and you can even drive around the taxi tracks in behind. So that is a national treasure.
Yeah.
That site. Like I visited there after I'd written the book. And I thought, oh, gee, this is so moving. It's like a place of ghosts.
Something else.
That was where number 452 squadron, one of my squadrons, was based at Strauss. But most of the other bases are on private land, but Hughes, the bomber base, which is on the other side of the highway, just a little bit further south, it's still there. You can see it on Google Earth.
Wow. I'll be checking that out.
The Kumali Creek, where the Beaufighters were, I actually met the owner. He was kind enough to let me and my mate onto the airfield and we could drive around. So There's also one of the bomber bases where the Dutch Mitchell Squadron was, McDonald, I think it's called. I've driven around on that. You can just find it, come off the road. The trees are sort of growing up really closely on the edges of the taxiway, to such an extent that they threaten to scrape the sides of your hired car.
So, but you're like, I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I'm going through.
So, there are these relics.
I think it's fantastic that these remnants and relics exist.
Yeah,
I think that's great. So while Japan is no longer a concern or a threat to Australians, do the current tensions with countries like Russia and China, well, China for us, raise any modern day concerns for us, in your opinion?
Well, certainly. Certainly. I mean, the consideration, like if you're just going to be rational and humane about it, I mean, humane towards Australia's population, the most important thing going forward from here is to avoid war with China, because the war with China would be an absolute catastrophe. And if we think that we could go into such a war without our obvious targets being hit with cruise missiles, then we're dreaming.
Say that last bit again. They're now obvious targets.
Obvious targets being hit with cruise missiles. So I'm talking about Darwin International Airport.
Surface to air.
I'm talking. They could be launched from warships. They could be launched from aircraft. They could be launched from submarines.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that the Americans wouldn't be doing that back to them, but that's not much comfort.
Yeah.
To a resident, let's say, of southeast Queensland, where Amberley is getting bombed.
Yeah. Ipswich is right there.
And where
Manito.
As far as Brisbane is concerned, Eagle Farm, like our airport, that's going to get bombed. And
so what kind of a reality do you think it would be in our generation, our lifetime?
Oh, I just think Australians have got very little idea of war. They're remarkably ignorant about it, despite all the hype every Anzac Day. What war would look like in the future for Australia would be not only our airports being hit and put out of commission and our ports, but perhaps most worryingly, our public infrastructure, like our water supply and our power stations.
Yeah.
And so if Australians want to think seriously about the rhetoric coming from America, particularly at the moment, under this current Secretary of Defence, if they want to think seriously about what that means for us, well, it would picture a city like Brisbane with no water coming out of the tap and no power when you try to turn your lights on, no fridges, no sewerage, and that situation pertaining for weeks before the Energex and CQ Water, etc., are able to repair the damage and get stuff working again. The Russians have tried to do this to the Ukrainians, obviously, over the last few years. But the thing about Ukraine, as well as Russia, as well as China, is that they're very populous countries and there's quite a lot of redundancy in their power and water networks. So they can cobble together a resumption of supply by hook or by crook.
I don't like that.
Obviously, the Ukrainian version of Energex workers all deserve VCs, the Ukrainian equivalent of VCs, 100%. For the work they've done over the last several years, keeping the wherewithal for ongoing civilized life, despite Russia's attempt to destroy their national existence.
Yeah.
But if Australians think that it's going to be any different for us in any prospective war with China, then they're dreaming.
What do you think that the Chinese end game would be if a war was to break out between Australia and China? What would they be wanting?
Well, it would be all about Taiwan, and so they'd be wanting to probably to have worldwide acquiescence in their annexation of Taiwan. I don't suppose they'd be stupid enough to invade, but they might easily engineer a coup d'etat or something like that, as well as a blockade, and then attempt to defeat or engage the American attempt to interdict their blockade.
Yeah.
So there'd be large-scale naval warfare over the Western Pacific. That's what the nature of the main war would be, and success for the Chinese would be the Americans giving up, which they will. Americans always give up. Look at every single war they've been in.
Vietnam.
Since World War II.
Yeah.
They will give up and they'll walk away and they'll leave their allies in the lurch. Do we want to
risk it?
Yeah, and who's going to be left in the lurch? Well, it's going to be a range of people, including Australia. So the Chinese attacks on Australia would be just intimidatory. Also acts of revenge if Australian Defence Forces were involved. So it's not going to be invasion.
Yeah.
It's going to be some form of retributive
what about terrorism via like mobile networks and electric cars and things like that?
Well, the Chinese definitely do full spectrum, which means that their system of warfare involves not only things that go bang, so-called kinetic effects, but it also involves suppressing every form of communication, hacking into every kind of computer system that they can hack into, no matter how mundane the organisation may be. If they can hack into it, and if they can just to close down the normal operation of that application or that website, obviously if it's Telstra we're talking about, or SEQ Water, and we're talking about major Commonwealth Bank, I don't suppose that any of those three would be easy to break into. I imagine they're really quite well defended.
Yeah.
But in an ideal Chinese game plan, they would hack into all of those three, plus all the others, like the Department of Defence, and they would shut all of those websites down. They shut down their internal systems, and they'd freeze the ability to make decisions by the normal processes. And that's part of their warfare. It's full spectrum warfare. But I'm broadly aware of the general tendency of the people's consumption of social media these days, even though I don't partake of it myself. But I just don't think it's reasonable to sheet it all home to the Chinese, considering how many of these organisations that produce this technology come from America.
Yeah. The TikTok is Chinese.
Yes, but that's not all Chinese.
No.
Because
there was a moment there where Trump, I believe it was Trump, canned TikTok in America, and everyone had a meltdown. And then it was back 24 hours later.
Yeah. It's if you shut down TikTok tomorrow, something similar would arise the next day in its place.
You are 100% right.
So it's like trying to stop people from smoking or drinking or something.
Yeah.
There will always be something that will replace it immediately.
And now, Anthony, tell me, where can our listeners find your books? So this one here that I've got in my hot little hand is Darwin Spitfires. It's got beautiful images in there. It's really well detailed. Where can our listeners find all of your books?
Well, I would suggest that Darwin Spitfires will be very easy to find through any good bookshop, as they say, or any good online seller. It's published by University of New South Wales Press, New South Books. And that one was re-released in only a couple of years ago.
Well, I've got the 2010 edition here on this one.
2011 was the original, I think, and that one probably came out in the anniversary edition 2021 or 2022 from memory. So it's a rejigged edition. It looks different. It's slightly redesigned. It's got a couple of mistakes corrected in it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
It's always the way.
And so I reckon there's a lot of stock left, and the listeners and viewers will have no difficulty finding a copy of that book.
And after this one, I'm doing Sub Hunter. That is for sure. Now, very last question with you today. Tony, tell
Yes.
me, have you ever seen yourself a UFO
No,
or a ghost?
no,
Neither.
no,
On all of your flying time,
no.
you've identified every object.
Well, you see things and you can't always identify it. I am a bit of an aircraft identifier, so I look twice, and I always, if I can, try to identify the type.
Mhm.
And obviously, sometimes you can't, but I'm always sure that's an aeroplane or that's a helicopter,
And
that
that's
kind of thing.
due to the maneuverings that you are
Yeah,
recognizing.
the height that it's at. I've never
Yeah.
seen anything that would give rise to anything of
I
that
was
nature.
so hoping you'd
Yeah.
seen a UFO.
No. And
Neither have I, by the way.
yeah.
And what about a ghost?
No, certainly not.
My guess so far are 50-50.
Really?
Yeah. I haven't seen a ghost either.
Yeah.
But I would like to
Yeah. I tried to get
speak to people about it.
I did have a period of my life where I was religious.
Which religion?
I don't want to go into it. It's definitely in the deep past.
Okay.
But I did end up concluding that, you know what, Tony, you're not very spiritual.
And that's all right. You're an academic. You're a realist.
Well, yeah, I am. I think I am a realist.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I think there's a sensitive element to what I do, because you've got to imagine people's hearts and the dreams and what would people do? What would people feel?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of emotional kind of engagement.
Yeah.
And also, when you think of trying to put the narrative together, there's a deeper reality. Like, is the story going up? Is it going down? You know, is the crisis here or is the crisis there? Where's the resolution? You know, you've got to be able to put shape on things. You can't be too literal.
Yep.
You've also got to draw the dots, draw lines between the dots, because not everything is stated.
Yep.
And frequently things are covered up. And so you've got to be able to deduce what lies behind. So, you know, even though I just said that I'm not particularly spiritual, I think I am quite...
You're open
to a pretty full range of human possibility.
I'm completely open to it. Yeah.
And I understand, you know, I really do know, like I met someone, I had several people, as a matter of fact, who did soul travel, transcendental meditation, and they described...
Astral?
Yeah, astral projection,
Wow.
the whole thing.
Wow.
And they described it...
On a substance?
No, just through Eastern
Meditation?
ascetic disciplines.
Wow.
Yeah. And I listened to them, and I had to conclude that it was real.
Because they're not an idiot.
Whether they literally went to those universes or literally, say, met the Buddha or whatever, that's not the question. The question is that I recognized from an early stage, you know, meeting these people was key to it, that all that extreme range of what humans report in terms of spiritual experiences, it's real.
Yeah.
So they're experiencing it really.
Yeah.
And when they come back down, it happened.
Yeah.
And that's just as powerful a reality to them as all kinds of things that happen in the material world.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean.
And you're right. I met two psychologists, two separate psychologists. Both of them, one of them is psychic and she sees ghosts. She hears them. She's got several of the different ways that she can see and hear ghosts. And then the other one sees and hears them too. She's not a psychic, but she sees and hears them. And these, again, they're not crazy people. These are very serious people and they have their claim. So I've got to put some kind of faith in it and only wish that I could.
Well,
apparently we all can.
You don't have to put faith in it. You merely accept that those people had an experience,
Yes.
and that's the way they reported it.
Yeah.
And it's not up to us to say that it was any different.
Yeah, well, that's not true. That's exactly right.
Who
Yeah.
are we to know that?
Yeah.
On what basis are we suddenly the judge
Yes. Because of our opinion.
to pronounce upon that?
Yeah.
And as you say, if the person has credibility, has demonstrated credibility, then you just have to go, well, I just shrug my shoulders and go, wow, that's
Tell
pretty
me
amazing.
more. Yeah.
That's what you experience. Okay, that's what you experience.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Tony. I had so much fun. I learned a heap about our Australian war effort, particularly up in Darwin and the top of Australia. I really appreciate you coming on today, and hopefully you'll come on and talk to me about a sub hunter.
Yeah, I'd be delighted. It's a pity we didn't get to talk more about Darwin Spitfires.
Oh, well, listen, Darwin Spitfires, you heard it here first. It's available at all good bookstores. Thanks for listening to Once Upon a Real Life with Belle. Don't forget to visit alphasport.com.au with your special discount code BELLE10 for 10% off Actiflex pain relieving gel. My name's Belle. See you on the next episode.